lives, right? We want massive impact in our businesses, we want massive impact in our families, in our relationships, in our character. That's what all of us are looking for. So I'm gonna go back in time just a little bit to right when I started doTERRA. It was 9.5 years ago. And I had an incredible team. Where's my team out there? We had an incredible team. We had some great leadership. Teresa Harding, David Sterling was really involved. And we also had some great momentum. 2 months after we started, we were diamond. Justin Harrison walked up to me and said, "Hey, Alysse, I'd like you to do a webinar." Remember this webinar, Justin? How many of you remember this webinar? I'd like you to do a webinar for the company on how you went diamond in 62 days. And we're gonna get the whole company on board. We're gonna motivate them, get them going. It's gonna be awesome. I'm like, great. And he says, "Alysse, you can use my webinar platform because they're used to that. And so just, I'm gonna give you my code and you can just jump into it. And you and your husband can use this platform." And I'm like, okay. So the day came that we were having the webinar. It was minutes before the webinar was starting. And Patrick, of course, was doing everything because he knows technology, right? My only job was to push the button that says start recording and to push the button, the red button that says stop recording. That was my only job. And of course, get the webinar, right? And Patrick looks at me and says, "Hey, Alysse, I'm not sure if all these people can hear us or not." There was lots of people on the webinar before it started. Minutes before, tons of people were on the webinar. And I said, "Well, what do you mean you're not sure?" He's like, "I'm not familiar with this platform. I don't know if they can hear us or not." And I'm like, "Well, Patrick, I need to know if they can hear us. Like, this was your job." And he says, "Well, babe, I just don't know." And I'm like, and I don't know if I was just having a bad day or if it was hormonal or if I was just mean. And I said, "Patrick, when the computer turns on, your brain turns off." And he says to me, "My brain doesn't turn off until you get mad at me." And I said, "Just leave, just go out, leave the door, and I'm gonna do it myself, like always." We started an argument. He ends up leaving the door, shuts the door, and 2 minutes later, in a very nice voice, I say, "Welcome to today's webinar. This is Alysse Sedivy, and I'm going to teach you how to go diamond." And I killed it, you guys. I did a great webinar. It was amazing. I walk upstairs, holding my head high. I'm like, this is great. And Patrick was white. And he says, "Alysse, everyone on the webinar heard us fight. The entire company heard us argue before the webinar started." I'm like, no. Patrick, tell me this isn't true. He's like, "It's totally true. I've been getting texts the entire time that you've been getting the webinar." And I literally laid on my kitchen table and I'm like, no, this is not happening. I can't believe this is happening. And then, unbeknownst to me, Justin Harrison was getting texts. Now remember, I was using Justin's webinar platform, so everyone thought I was talking to Justin. And his leaders were texting him saying, "How dare you let her talk to you like that? Who is she?" And they were having a fit, right? So I think to myself, I have to call the owners. Like, this is gonna blow up, right? I have to call David Sterling and tell him what I've done. So I get on the phone and I call David. I remember, just so happens that Greg Cook was in his office at the time. And I say, "Hey, Dave, you know that webinar that you wanted me to do and get the whole company excited about? Well, Patrick and I we got in a fight at the beginning of the webinar and everybody heard it." And in a very composed voice, this just like Dave Sterling, he says, "Did you cuss at him, Alysse?" I'm like, "No, I didn't cuss at him." And I hear Greg Cook busting up laughing in the background. He's dying laughing, right? Do you remember this, Greg? Where is Greg? There he is. You remember this, right? So I'm feeling really bad. 2 minutes later, I get off the phone, and I needed some love. I needed someone that would understand me. I needed I felt like crawling under a rock, so I called the only person I knew. Well, who did I call? I called Natalie Goddard. I'm like, Natalie, this is what happened, this is what I said, this is what I did. And she listened, and she was lovely, and she was loving, and then at the very end, she gave me a truth. And she said this, Alysse, when you're living high and mighty, who you are will eventually come out. Oh. Who you are will eventually come out. Do you remember this, Nat? Oh, yeah. I remembered that for a really long time. Who we are, who could forget that, right? Okay, I wasn't gonna say this, but now we're in the moment. How many of you have ever been on a call with your husband? You're doing the business together, right? We had these calls that we do all the time, and they were at a certain time, and you have to get them ready, and you have to, everyone gets on at a certain time, right? And we had them every day. And me and Patrick struggled at the beginning, getting along, knowing what to do, who does what. You know, what's your part, what's my part, how do I back off, it was so hard doing the business together at the beginning, and 30 seconds before the call was starting, he would look at me and say, after we'd just been totally arguing, and he'd say, you ready to be fake? And I'm like, absolutely. Let's do this thing. This is not the talk that you thought it was going to be. This is not the talk. This is not the talk that Emily was hoping it would be. Habit number 1, the power of belief. When I was 14 years old, too young to have a real job, my mom hooked me up with a gig. She said, Alysse, you can go down to the local Christmas tree lot, and when people come in, you can help them pick out their favorite Christmas tree, and they'll pay you money for it. I thought this was cool. I was 14, I could help people, right? And I was pretty good at it. I would show people Christmas trees, they'd pick out the one they'd like. Well, after a while, I thought to myself, I think I can take this to the next level. And this elderly woman came, and she picked out her Christmas tree, and I looked at her and I said, now, when you get that Christmas tree home, if you don't want to put the lights on or decorate it, I'd be happy to come to your house, and for a small fee, I could decorate that tree for you. This began my life in business. That's not what changed me. It was what my mother said. And she told me, Alysse, you're a natural at this. Alysse, you're great at sales. Alysse, one day, you're going to be a great businesswoman. And those lines repeated through my head over and over. Alysse, you're a natural at this. Alysse, you're great at sales, and one day, Alysse, you're going to be a great businesswoman. Alysse, you are a natural at this. Alysse, you're great at sales, and one day, you're going to be a great businesswoman. It is the power of belief that causes things to happen in our lives. This is one of my favorite quotes, the next one from Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Woo-hoo! Let's talk about this next statement. It's from Lectures on Faith, and it says, if men were duly to consider themselves and turn their thoughts and reflections to the operations of their own minds, they would readily discover that it is faith and faith alone which is the moving cause of all action in them, and that without it, both mind and body would be in a state of inactivity, and all other exertions would cease, both physical and mental. What does that mean? It means this. Faith equals belief. And if we're not doing the mental energy first, nothing happens. There is no activity. If we're not engaged in doing that mental activity first, we don't achieve anything. Nothing happens. This is a man by the name of Craig Manning. Craig Manning is a mental health coach. He's amazing. He works with mid to top level athletes He works with people that have been abused, have addictive behaviors. And he said, dwelling obsessively on what we do wrong is one of the greatest sources of interference to maximizing our potential. I'm going to read that one more time. Dwelling obsessively on what we do wrong is one of the greatest sources of interference to maximizing our potential. So let me tell you what happened. I believed I was going to be a good business person, so I started a business when I was 15 years old. It was a clothing store. And over the next 10 years, I sold, in the late 80s, $400 outfits. That was a lot of money back then. To executives' wives. I was a teenager. I was selling to 40 and 50-year-olds. I was the only employee besides my mother. And I believed that I was good at it, that I was great at sales, and one day I'd be a great businesswoman. Well, 10 years go by, and I'm 25 years old, and I decide I'm going to kind of revamp this business. Because in Utah, tons of people were asking for modest wedding gowns and modest dresses. So I thought, if anywhere in the world modesty would sell, it would be in Utah Valley. So I'm going to do this. So I invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, got lots of lines of credit out, designed the gowns myself. They were good looking, by the way. Brought them in from China, and we started selling. $350,000 in debt, we started selling. And no one bought anything. No one. In fact, mothers would walk into the store and they'd say, I'll purchase anything in this entire store. Anything you want to buy. And I would hear them arguing in the dressing room, and the girl would come out, tears streaming down her face, and they wouldn't purchase anything. Months go by, and not only do I not have the money to pay the bills, but guess what? Now new collectors were calling, and investors were calling, and Patrick couldn't even get out of bed. He was so depressed. We were 25 years old, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and we thought we're either going bankrupt, or guess what? We're going to be paying this off for the rest of our lives. And that self-talk that I did for so many years, that changed. Let me tell you what my self-talk started to look like. A bride or a girl would walk into the store, and I would say something to her, and she would seem uninterested, and I immediately started saying in my mind, she's not going to buy a dress. There's nothing in here that she wants. I'm a terrible designer. Why did I even start this business in the first place? I'm going to lose everything. And this just played over and over and over in my mind. Craig Manning says, doubt is a mental habit and doesn't stay contained to one area of your life. It can and does spread to other areas of your life, and this is so true. When we start doubting ourselves, we don't just doubt our business. We don't just doubt our sales. We doubt everything. We doubt our relationships. We doubt our ability to do anything. We doubt us. And it affects every aspect of our lives. When doubt takes a hold of somebody, action completely halts. Doubt is the exact opposite of belief. You cannot have doubt and belief at the same time. You can't. In fact, he goes on to say the law of occupied space. An object can only occupy one place at a time. As it applies to the mind in both faith and fear, self-belief and self-doubt, or simply positive and negative thoughts, cannot occupy the mind at the same time. It's impossible for us to fear and believe at the same time. It doesn't happen. So let me tell you a story about one of the people he coached. She was a skier, an average skier. She dreamed that one day she would make the Olympic team, but it was a far, far, far cry. And she started working with Craig. And Craig teaches people how to change their self-talk. He teaches people how to mentally look at something differently and imagine it before it ever happens. He makes sure that they have a mantra. It was the week before qualifications for the Olympics. She was in 10th place at the time. She went into the week being in 10th place, and by the second to the last day, she was now slotted as first place. As first place. She'd been making unbelievable bounds, unbelievable growth. And it was the last day, and she's standing on the chutes, and her old self-talk starts coming back. And she says to herself, I shouldn't be here. I'm a fraud. These people are way better than me. I don't even deserve this. This is not my day. This is not my day. She goes to Craig, her mental health coach, and she says, I don't think I've got it today. It's not my day. He's like, what? And she's like, listen, even if I don't do good, nobody will be disappointed because I went farther than they ever thought I would go. And he's like, is that what you should be telling yourself in your mind? And she goes, you're right, you're right. I need to remember. And so she gets out of her skis, walks over to the mountain where nobody is, puts her hands up in the air, and she screams as loud as she can, today's my day! I'm gonna make it happen today! She's yelling into the mountains, and she comes back with all the energy she can, gets back into her skis, and he said, I was looking at her face and I could tell she is determined. And she had the best run of her life, and she took first. She took first place. So, way back in those days, in the bridal store, I had to work on this. I had to remember who I was. I had to remember what I wanted to be. I had to remember that I was good, that I was talented, that someday I would be a great businesswoman, right? And it took a lot of time, and I had to remember that I could be creative, and I could come up with really creative solutions. And I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and I worked on it. And within a year and a half, that little bridal store went from selling $250,000, and the next year we sold $2.5 million. And then we took it nationwide, and we sold tens of millions of dollars of bridal gowns and formal wear. The greatest lesson I learned was this. There was no more fear. That belief was at the center of everything. That the way I talked to myself in my mind was at the center of everything. So when you're standing in a class and you're thinking to yourself, they're not gonna buy. I don't think I'm gonna close these people. I don't even know how to lead. Why would anyone want to follow me into business? If they really knew what my business was like, they would want nothing to do with me. If that's what's playing in your mind, Craig teaches us you have to immediately turn it around. You have to immediately turn it around and replace those thoughts with, I've got this. Everyone here tonight is going to sign up. They would be a fool not to want to be on my team. Woo! And that is what constantly plays in my head over and over and over. Every time I sit down with somebody, every time I get on a phone call with somebody, every time I'm put in front of somebody, it's this, I've got this.
Yeah.
Because you're good at this. And they would be a fool not to want to be with me. Now, there are times in our lives where it's way bigger than us. And I know these times. And that changes for me a little bit. When I have these times, when I know it's way bigger than me, when I know I don't really have it. And I just replace it with something else, and it goes like this. With me and God, we've got this. We can do this, right? So, number one, daily habit. We must start replacing that self-talk in our head. We must be constantly feeding our minds with positive things of what we want to become and who we really are and who we can be. Because we will attract those people. Daily habit number 2. Perfect the correct skill sets. make perfect. We know this, right? Practice makes what? Permanent. If you practice incorrect skill sets, what are you going to be? Inefficient. It doesn't matter if you practice them 1,000 times. In fact, you solidify more and more incorrect skill sets. If you don't know how to sample correctly, if you don't know how to get at least 8 out of 10 people that say they're going to come to a class to actually show up, if you don't know how to close almost everybody in your class, if you don't know how to get them on LRP, and if you don't know how to lead along someone that's initially excited about the product and wants to do the business, almost 75 to 85% of the time, you're not practicing the correct skill sets. That's the bottom line. So if you're struggling in an area of your business, you're not practicing the correct skill sets because they are out there. And when we do them over and over and over and over, what happens is they become easier. I'm actually going to move forward. I'm going to say this first. That which we persist in doing becomes easier to do. Not that the nature of the thing itself has changed, but that our power to do is increased. It doesn't become easier to hold a class, it's the same class. It doesn't become easier to sign somebody up, it's the same process of signing somebody up. It doesn't become easier to find builders. It doesn't become easier to go diamond. But our capacity has increased because we've done it over and over and over again, and we've done it correctly. Now, how do we know how to do correct skill sets? How do we know the skill sets that we should be using? I mean, that's a whole month's worth of topic, right? You can start with empowered success. You can start with showing up on Saturday after convention and actually going to that day-long seminar on how to do this. You can go online, you can get on the calls, you can do the things that you know how to do. Let me tell you what me and my team did. Do you guys remember these? We did something called daily mentor calls. So I believe that every single day, and it wasn't Saturdays and Sundays, we did Monday through Friday, right? We had a call every single day. And then we got recorded and people listened to them for years and years after. But it was the right mindset, the right motivation, and the correct skill set over and over and over and over again. Only 15 minutes long. And it just set you, it kept you in the right mindset, and it got you going that day. Now, these actually, we used them for so many years, and then the FDA came and we shut them down because they were non-compliant. But in 30 days, they'll be back up and running and totally updated. They are totally free. You can use them and share them with anybody. All I need you to do, if you want to get on these daily mentor calls and figure out the correct skill sets that you should be practicing to make perfect, just email dailymentorcalls@gmail.com. Just take a picture of that slide really quick and email dailymentorcalls@gmail.com. I'll send you the daily mentor calls and you can do with them whatever you'd like.
Woo!
You guys like that?
Thank you.
Next, we already talked about this. Tiffin did a great job yesterday on talking about an accountability partner. Yeah, give it up for Tiffin. She did great. She did a great job on talking about that. Let me tell you what I'm going to recommend to you right now. I believe that the more simple something is, the more it duplicates. The more it duplicates, the more that we have the opportunity to keep duplicating it for many, many years, and it becomes just like a machine. So, I believe that every single one of us should have an accountability partner. This is not a mentor call. This is not doing this with 20 or 30 people. This is one person that you are held accountable to, and they are held accountable to you. And it's simple. All you do is before 10 a.m. in the morning, you text them 2 things you're gonna get done that day. Your 2 biggest priorities. And by 10 p.m. that night, you text them back and say, I did it. That's it. 2 things. Your biggest priorities, right? This is Martina Valničková. She lives in Slovakia. I live right now in Czechoslovakia.
Woo.
And she's on my team, and she'd been telling me for years, I want to go blue, I want to go blue, and she was just stuck at diamond. A lot of you would love to be stuck at diamond out there, right? Woo. Yeah, she was stuck at diamond. And so this is what she says, her experience with this. Now remember, her native tongue is not English. So if it sounds a little weird, it's because she's doing a great job. Texting 2 things I wanted to do every day, and doing them was hard, but it helped me greatly. There were things I kept pushing for later, but some of them for like a half year later, because I didn't feel very comfortable doing them. And when I had to come up with the 2 things to do by 10 a.m., I remembered those things and I did them. You can't imagine the relief when it was done. I was able to finally feel like I keep my commitments, like I don't owe anything to anybody. I started feeling more confident, and I even achieved what I wanted at the beginning of this project. I became a blue diamond. But still, what I've learned in the process is worth more than just becoming a certain rank. It's the knowledge that, for sure, I can make and keep commitments. I want every single one of you to take out your phones. Justin Harrison, take your phone out. Eric Larson, take your phone out. The presidentials are not immune to this, right? Every person in here, take your phone out. Greg Cook, take your phone out. I want you to text the person in your life that you believe you can be held accountable to. And I want you to ask them to be your accountability partner right now and explain to them, I want to text you by 10 a.m. 2 things I commit to get done. And by 10 p.m. at night, I'm going to text you and tell you that I did them. Will you do the same for me? Will you text me your 2 things? And let me tell you what will happen in this process. Come on, Melina. You should be texting me right now, babe. Yeah, where's Molly? Who you texted, Mom? Me.